Welcome to episode 329 of the Postal Hub podcast. I'm Ian Kerr. We're kicking off 2024 with a discussion about sustainability. Joining me in a moment is Luke Lloyd, Head of Markets at the IPC. He's going to talk about some recent findings from the SMMS program and much more. Joining me on the line is Luke Lloyd. Luke is Head of Markets at the IPC. Luke, welcome back to the Postal Hub. We're going to talk about SMMS and emissions reduction. Let's start with talking about this, the SMMS program that the IPC has. Can you tell us a bit about the aim of the program and why postal operators participate in SMMS?
Yes, sure. So the full title, and I agree it's a bit of a mouthful, the name, the IPC Sustainability Measurement and Management System, but indeed SMMS is a lot easier. So we launched this in 2019 in order to align the postal actions with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. We previously had another program prior to that, which followed also on sustainability, but this SMMS goes a bit further. And I'll give a little overview of it before I then talk about the importance of it. So in terms of what it's covered, it of course looks at things like carbon emissions and efficiency and policy, but also the expanded role includes things like health and safety, resource efficiency, climate change, air quality, the circular economy, and sustainable procurement. So aligning with the UN goals there. And the reason for Post to participate in this is really in terms of concretely, what does the program do? We monitor such things as the emissions per post, and we also audit that as well. So Post provide us information about their carbon emissions, about their percentage of electric vehicles, and so on. And then IPC, we measure that, and then we also audit it to make sure that the data is correct. And this way, it's got several benefits. For one, it helps the Post to go out to clients and show concretely what they're doing to make the world a better place. And also has a regulatory perspective as well, because many governments, especially, for example, the EU, they're really looking into developing more stringent measures for carbon footprint in particular. And so there are several reasons why it's important. And of course, the Postage itself, I talked about carbon footprint, and we have a large carbon footprint just due to the size of our industry. So there are 31 posts that are members of the SMMS, and of those 31 posts, that considers 100,000 buildings and how they're heated, how their electricity works, 600,000 vehicles, be they electric, diesel, or another, and 1.3 million employees who have to get to work as well. So considering the scale of the industry, we definitely have a social responsibility to be monitoring our actions as well.
And you've just mentioned there that it's not just about measuring emissions in the last mile. There's buildings, there's the middle mile and things like that. So on that, I understand that there are some 2030 targets as part of the SMMS program. So can you just share some of the progress that IPC members who are part of the SMMS have made towards those targets?
Yes, sure. And first of all, I'd like to mention before the SMMS, to give another phrase, was the EMMS. And there we had various targets back pre-2019, and we hit all those targets ahead of schedule. So the new targets are actually very ambitious. So the status of the targets is the first one is 75% of energy used in postal buildings to come from renewable sources. So be that purchasing renewable energy or such things as having solar panels on the top of sorting centers and so on. So the target is 75% in 2030. Our starting point was 14% in 2012, 34% in 2021, and we're steadily getting there. We're 38% of renewable energy for our buildings in 2022. So still quite far from the target, but also every year gradually moving up that scale. The second one that I have is for by 2030, we need to have, we're aiming for 50% of the vehicle fleet to be alternative fuel vehicles. An alternative fuel, that's mainly electric vehicles, but also some others as well. And our starting point in 2012 was 12% of the postal fleet was using alternative fuels. And we're now up to 26% in 2022. And concretely, that is 165,000 vehicles, of which 127,000 are electric vans. Then moving further ahead, I hope you're enjoying this various stats coming through. The next one.
I love a bit of stats when we talk about these things. Because,
yeah, well, you told me to be concrete, so here we go.
You did mention earlier that these are all audited as well. So it's not just that people are picking figures out of the air. These are real figures.
Yeah, no, we audited. That's really the key strength of the program, to make sure that there's no greenwashing, or if it's not fair, if so different posts have different definitions of what is renewable energy. So that's why we have auditing, to make sure that there is an even spread across the posts. Then next up for a target, we have 75% of group waste to be reused or recycled. So again, looking at that circular economy. And the status was, we launched that one in 2019, where 47% of postal waste was being recycled or reused. We're now up to 61% already in 2022. So we're looking very on target for that one in particular. And then if I look at my next one, I have indeed one last one, which gets a lot of attention, which is about the CO2 emissions. And of course, we have the COP28 going on now as well, or at least at the time of this recording. And the aim is to reduce collective, what was called Scope 1 and Scope 2 CO2 emissions by 50% compared to a 2019 baseline. It is quite complex, some of the numbers around this, so I also recommend people look at the report if they want to dive into some of the figures. But we can see that there is a like-for-like 7% decrease in emissions compared to 2019, which accounts for 400,000 tons of CO2. And we have been looking at emissions reductions since the launch of the EMMS program back in 2008. And if we look at the member posts from 2008 till now, the reduction in emissions, Scope 1 and 2, is equivalent to 29 million tons of CO2. So it's a lot.
When it comes to meeting these targets, Luke, I remember being in a meeting some years ago where someone who had responsibility for sustainability and things like that in a post was saying, we've dealt with the low hanging fruit already, and whilst we're seeing a lot of the things you've talked about, electrifying of fleets and alternative fuels, it almost feels like we're at a point in our sustainability journey, to use a word I loathe, that innovation is at the core of making progress now. So are there any interesting innovations from posts that are helping reduce delivery emissions?
Yeah, absolutely. And indeed, that's part of the program I hadn't mentioned, as well as having our various target setting and all these numbers that I gave. We also do have best practice sharing, webinars and workshops between the group where we discuss innovations and post learn from each other. And in a recent webinar in particular, we had a focus indeed on, I suppose, the higher hanging fruit, which is more the middle mile. So the last mile, the electric vehicles, as you can see, there's still some way to go, but everyone's along the path. The technology is there and it's evolving. But if you look at the bigger vehicles, so for example, electric trucks to get from the sorting center to the post office or from the airport, there's still some work to be done there. So that's the technology is needing to catch up. For example, charging stations that have the sufficient power for a large vehicle. So there are several of our members, for example, in Norway, the Post is really very active in this to try and help the innovators to develop a product specifically for the Post as well. So electric trucks is definitely one innovation that is coming up. And we're also looking at hydrogen cell trucks as well, which is, I won't pretend to understand, but it's a complex thing and it can definitely have a big role in the future if it continues to progress. Also, I did mention airports. Of course, there is still the role of planes, and looking at more sustainable aviation fuel as well is one of the innovations. And of course, some posts also don't always think just about the expensive trucks, the expensive new technologies, but also looking back to some older technologies that may be appropriate to reduce carbon footprint. So a good example here of an innovation is the Deutsche Post DHL, a part of our program, and they within Germany, they often send items by rail rather than by plane if it's going a long distance from one side of the country to the other. If the client agrees to taking an extra day with the journey, then they can significantly reduce the carbon footprint by taking that approach. And another innovation that we talked about in our workshop as well is reusable packaging, especially with the rise of e-commerce, and there's so much packaging around. And so posts are also involved in that. There are several posts that have been trialing consumer appetite for reusable packaging, because the key challenge with reusable packaging is convincing the consumer to then unpack their clothing and then somehow get it back into the postal system, be that dropping off the packaging at a parcel locker or the next time that the postman walks past is to put it into his hand again. So there are several trials from posts that are trying to find ways to make consumers engage with reusable packaging, and also e-retailer clients as well. So that's also something for the future.
On reusable packaging, I was at a post office in Finland, one of Posti's offices, and they have the opportunity in the post office for consumers to drop off their used packaging so somebody else can use it at the post office. So they come in to pack something at the post office, and they can either buy a new post pack's the Australia Post brand, you know what I mean, everybody, the packaging box or whatever at the post office, or for no charge, use some box or something that some other customer has dropped off. How about that?
That's fantastic.
Isn't it? So something to ponder there, everybody. Let's move on with those. One thing, we talk a lot about parcels at the moment, but letters is the traditional business of the post. Letters are in decline. Parcels are in the ascendancy. Is this change from being a letters-focused business to a parcel-focused business having any impact on Post's emission reduction programs?
Yes, definitely. There's also part of the SMMS program report as well. We also have some figures about CO2 emissions per letter and CO2 emissions per parcel. So we break that down for each. We also have target setting for that as well. So in fact, a current challenge for our member posts is that with the reduction in the intensity of letter mail deliveries, the reduction of demand for letters, it means that the emissions per letter is not exactly going down as much as we'd hope. However, the growth in parcel demand is meaning that the emissions per parcel is coming down. So with that volume comes some efficiencies that come around it as well. And of course, it wouldn't be fair here if I don't mention, of course, parcel lockers. I know they always come up. And for parcel lockers, for e-commerce, a lot of posts investing in it. I won't go into all the details because I know that you've done several podcasts on this one, I'm sure as well. But if parcel lockers can be a great way for e-retailers and posts to save money in terms of delivery and save emissions, as long as people walk/cycle to the locker in particular, then it can be a great way to reduce the emissions of cross-border or domestically delivered e-commerce items as well.
Of course, if people go in their tractor to collect the parcel from the locker, it may have negated any potential environmental benefit of delivering to a parcel locker. I think there's an interesting thing here also for us, Luke, in the entire postal sector is this: as we transition from letters focus to a parcels focus, and we see parcels and letters being delivered together, as posts optimize their routes for letters and parcels, there's a lot of focus on doing this for financial reasons. Let's be perfectly blunt. With falling letter volumes and increasing numbers of delivery points, and that classic conundrum there. I think this is going to be interesting to see how this also impacts on our ability to reduce emissions overall in the last mile with that as that mix changes. Anyway, something for bigger brains than mine to ponder, probably, Luke. I'm sure it's on the radar at the IPC.
Definitely. And of course, we notice that each country is very specific. You take a country like Australia with some big empty spaces in the middle compared to a country like Belgium or the Netherlands, which are a very dense network. we find that it's so individual per post. So we try to bring the information together and take learnings from one country to another, but it is a complex topic. And one thing that we're also doing within the IPC is exploring the carbon footprint of a cross-border online purchase. So if I buy an item from, be it China or Germany or wherever, what is the carbon footprint of that item? Which is a complex thing, but it's a next stage for us in terms of data collection, because we find that this is being demanded increasingly, first of all, by consumers. And there's a segment of consumers who want to know this, and it helps to define their purchase. It's also wanted by e-retailers as well. I know that Amazon recently signed a big contract with An Post in Ireland, and their climate pledge was a key part of that as well. So that's also the financial reason to be having more information, especially on CO2 emissions. And then finally, there's a regulatory perspective of, especially in the EU, they've come out with some new legislation where they demand really quite detailed information on CO2 emissions. And even with our members who, within our sustainability program, we always felt that we are one step ahead of the game for the regulators. We always thought they asked for X information, but we have so much more. But now, in fact, especially in the EU, there's really asking for quite some detail of information. And that's what we're looking towards as well.
Luke, fascinating discussion. If people want to find out more about the IPC and the various programs it has, it's not just about emissions monitoring. There's plenty more happening there. Where should they go?
Yeah, you can reach out to me, of course, or you can go to the IPC website, ipc.be, and it's very clearly signposted the sustainability program. We recently brought out our public report from the SMMS program, which can be easily downloaded from there as well. And it's quite a lot of detail for a public report, so feel free to benefit from that.
I'll stick a link to all of that on the episode page on thepostalhub.com, and I'll also put a link to Luke's LinkedIn profile if you want to follow him on LinkedIn and all the postal goodness that you post there, especially cross-border, which is, why not? If you want to follow Luke on LinkedIn, why not? It's a nice thing to do. Give him a little bit of a buzz in 2024 by following on LinkedIn. Why not? There's plenty of other nonsense out there on LinkedIn. Let's be honest, Luke. It's good to have some interesting stuff that's not all humble brags
or inspirational quotes.
I can tell you, my LinkedIn feed is inspirational quote free. So if you're following me on LinkedIn, there'll be no inspirational quotes. It's more likely to be drone bagging than anything else. Luke Lloyd, Head of Markets at the IPC, thank you very much for joining us on the Postal Hub podcast today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ian.
Coming soon on the Postal Hub podcast, Kate Muth from IMAG talks about developments in international mail. Mustafa Tonguç, the Managing Director Germany at DHL Express, will join us to talk about some interesting topics that we haven't really covered before on the Postal Hub podcast, so stay tuned for that. And coming up in the coming weeks, we will have a nice discussion about parcel lockers. Yes, parcel locker aficionados, if that's how you describe yourselves. We'll be talking about parcel lockers on the Postal Hub podcast very soon. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast in something like Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify. There are probably other places you can subscribe to the podcast as well. I just don't really know about them. So just subscribe. And if you have a chance, please do leave a rating and maybe a review. Really, it's just a nice thing to do. And I appreciate all those positive reviews and positive ratings that people leave. If you want to subscribe to my email newsletter, you can go to thepostalhub.com and you'll find various email newsletters there. You can subscribe to whether you like weekly, daily, or infrequent. They're all there for you somewhere on thepostalhub.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn or follow the Postal Hub on LinkedIn or follow both me and the company page. If you want to email me, my email address is ian@thepostalhub.com. I'm Ian Kerr. Thanks for listening in, and I look forward to your company next time on the Postal Hub podcast.